Hey, you know what's missing here?
No?
A chaise longue, you know, where we can stretch our leg, take in some sun, relax, and take a nap outside.
That's a good idea, and I have the perfect wood for that. I have some cedar left over from the deck.
No, it has to be more rustic than that.
What can be more rustic than recycled wood?
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Well, do what you want and I'll make one myself.
Do what you want. I will make one in cedar. First of all, I need to assemble my workbench. This will be very useful to make those chairs. And my chair will be made out of some leftovers from our deck restoration. With the cushions, I can better figure out what I have to do. And with the wood I have on hand, I decided to make something like this. 2 long styles, which will hold a bunch of rails and a tiltable back. But I have this hole in my long piece. I need to remove it. So when I'm done, I have to cut a rabbet on each piece, so I'll be able to make half-laps joints later. Then I cut them to length. I want this to be 21 inches wide, so I lay the style at that distance and measure the distance in between the rabbets. But before cutting all the rails, I need to make sure I have at least one side square. Then with the board placed exactly where I need to cut it, I put a stop on the other side. Now I can batch cut all the boards I'll need for the seat. Now, just like for the styles, I need to cut a rabbet at the end of each board to make the half-lap joint. This is what everything will look like with the cushion. Now I can start to glue all this. I begin with the 2 extremities. To clamp this, I lay 1 long clamp across the seat and 1 small over each joint. Then I can do the same thing for the rest of the rails. But I didn't bring enough clamps. I need to wait a bit for the glue to dry. So during this time, I'm going to cut a strip to fill the gap in between the rails. Now that the glue had some time to dry, I unclamp some parts and use those clamps to clamp elsewhere. The next day, I repeat all the same steps, but this time on the back seat. I wait until I can take back my clamps, and then I can cut and glue the filler strips in between the rails. But I have one small hiccup. It's so humid outside here that the glue was not completely dry, even after 1 day. So the glue joint broke. I have to re-glue the side, to which I had glued some fillers. But I still can work on something else. So I cut some 4x4s to reinforce the legs. When the 6 of them are cut, I can trace the width of their leg on one side and the thickness on the other. When I'm done, I can cut between the lines. Then I just need to remove the unwanted wood. And here's the result. After a while, I have my 6 supports, and now I can cut the actual legs. Next, I glue each leg in place. And finally, screw 2 screws. Now I can glue the rest of the filler blocks. All done. I just need to wait for the glue to dry. Next, I need to do something for the backrest. I opted for some pieces of wood which will act as an hinge. I begin with the 45-degree cut. In fact, this is just for the look. I also have a second aesthetic cut to make. When it's done, I glue and screw both hinges to the backrest. When I put those in place, I can see it's not perfect. Here it's more obvious. One side is flushed, but not the other. I trace what I need to remove and remove it. Now I can try the backrest for the first time. A real success. But I need some back supports. I mark where they should go, remove the backrest, and remove some wood. Then I can soften the sharp edges and also make sure all the pieces are flush with each other. Then I can put the backrest in place again and cut the supports. It's perfect, but only for this position. I want a second one right here. So after marking where I want it to be, I remove the backrest again. Cut the last filler blocks and glue them in place. Then I can glue and screw the legs in place. I take the opportunity with the center leg to reinforce this hole I have on one style. When the glue is dry, I soften all the edges that I didn't do before and chamfer the bottom of each leg. Now I'm ready to apply the finish. I mix 1 part of spar varnish, 1 part of linseed oil, and 1 part of mineral spirits together and brush the first coat of finish. I begin under the seat. Turn the chair around and apply the finish on top. When the seat is done, I do the same to the backrest. The next day, when the varnish is dry, I apply a second coat.
I prefer natural wood. For that, I need to cut some trees in the forest. I need the trees to be not too big, not too small, and of course, not too crooked. We bring them to the cottage. I think I'll have enough for 1 chair. Since Alain gave me all the measurements, I began by cutting 2 long strings for the stiles and put them aside for later. Then I cut 2 long ones for the sides and the backrest. Next, I start to work on the stretchers. I cut 4 of them. Then I place them at an equal distance on each side of the backrest sides. I mark the places on the stiles where I need to make the half laps. I cut on the lines down to the height of the blade. Then I remove some wood down to the cut line. I have several to do. I place everything together to see what it looks like. Everything is perfect. Now I mark the location of the half lap, so I do the same thing for the stretchers. But this time, because the pieces of wood are slimmer, I use the miter saw. I do both sides, making sure the laps are on the same side for each piece of wood. I make the puzzle again and drill some pilot holes before I screw them in place. And voila! The backrest is complete. It looks pretty strong. I remove the nuts and pieces of branches that stick out and could make the chair uncomfortable. Next, I start to work on the stiles. I cut them to length. Then I place them beside the backrest to be able to measure the length of the stretchers. I cut them the same way I did the other ones. When they're all cut, I make the puzzle again and mark the location of the stretchers on the stiles. Next, I cut on the marks and remove some wood. I do the same thing for the stretchers. Finally, I put everything together. Well, as you can see, I need to do a little tweaking here and there. Then I drill some pilot holes and screw all the stretchers. Next, I start to work on the legs. I need 6 of them. I cut bigger pieces of wood to make sure it will be strong. I also got at least 20 braces at 45 degrees to solidify them. Here are the legs. They only need to be parallel and have the same length. They sure look a little crooked, but I guess we can call this art. Now it's time to put them in place. I begin by marking the location for each one before I make the half lap. I make sure everything is fine, and yes, I can proceed. I use a long screw that goes through the stretchers and the stile and into the leg. I remove a few screws that I used before to replace them with longer ones. I screw this one with a slight angle, but the legs are too wobbly. So I install 3 braces to solidify each one. I make pilot holes before screwing them in place. Ah, it's much better like that. Now I have to install a pivot for the backrest. To do that, I screw a very long lag bolt through the stile of the backrest and the bottom part of the chair. I begin with a pilot hole. Then I use clamps to help me keep the space even between the two. I start to screw, but when I notice that something has moved, I just stop. I unscrew what I just did, place everything correctly, screw it again until it holds together, then I begin to screw the other side. Then I finish screwing the first side. Here you can see that it pivots very easily. Now I only have to make the 3 positions for the backrest. I begin by cutting 2 supports with an angle of 30 degrees. I drill a pilot hole and I screw them on each side of the backrest. Next, I make some marks for the position I want the backrest to be, and I cut them. I remove some wood to make a notch with an angle of 90 degrees that will block the supports. And voila, my chair is finished.
Now to test the 2 chairs, we have to remove everything that's on the dock to make some room for them.
Alain moves his chair first. It doesn't seem that heavy. One done. He sets his backrest. Now it's my turn. Oh boy, that's heavy. I can do this by myself. I need some help with this. There we go. I also set my backrest.
My chair looks great. The finish makes the grain pop. It's pretty sturdy. It's not made of popsicle sticks.
What I like about my chair is the rustic look of the bark. It's pretty stable. If one piece of it rots, I can just cut another tree and replace it. You can't do that with Alain's chair. There are no cedars growing around here.
We bought these two reversible cushions. The color are not that pretty, but it's not really a problem in the middle of the woods.
And now the moment you've all been waiting for. Which one is the most comfortable? Let's try them. Surprise! Mine is more comfortable than I would have thought. Even the dog tried them.
Mine is unsurprisingly comfortable. But I'm surprised. I never thought your chair would be comfortable. I could sleep well on that chair like that.
Yours also. The only flaws with yours are that the sticks to block the position of the backrest can fall, and there's a piece of wood with a hole that used to be rotten wood.
Yes, but I don't like the pieces of bark that sticks out here and there. I think it looks dirty.
Maybe, but my chair can be stored outside along the wall of the cottage. And since it's not the prettiest one, nobody would want to steal it. Yours must be kept under a roof. Look at what the front porch looks like now. We can't decide which chair is best.
So we want your feedback on that. We invite you to vote for the chair you prefer on Facebook at this address. Vote for my cedar chair with the wah.
You can haha me to vote for my birch chair.
If you love both chairs, just vote love.
And we'll know who the winner is.
So, good luck!
Good luck! Alain! Alain!
And we'll see each other pretty soon in another episode of The Woodpecker.